She was young, stunning, rising fast in the world of beauty influencers. Her posts were flawless. Her life looked perfect. But then, just after Thanksgiving, she disappeared. Days later, her body was found dumped on the side of a Houston road. No clothes, no signs of trauma, just gone. Her husband said she left the house and didn't come back. Her friends said she was terrified of him. And here's where it gets even darker. While the world searched for her phone kept pinging. Someone had it. Someone who wasn't Alexis. This isn't just a story about a missing woman. It's about secrets, control, and a man who smiled for the cameras while hiding something unthinkable. Thanksgiving of 2020 was supposed to be a happy break time with friends, maybe a little quiet after the chaos of the year. Alexis Sharkey had just turned 26. She lived in Houston, Texas, and from the outside, her life looked like a dream. A rising influencer, gorgeous red hair, flawless photos, sponsored posts. She had tens of thousands of followers. But just after Thanksgiving weekend, Alexis went silent. Completely, no texts, no stories, no new selfies. For someone who lived online, that wasn't normal at all. Her friends noticed first. Then her mom. Calls went unanswered. Hours turned to days, and finally she was reported missing. That's when things took a sharp turn. Who was the last person to see her? What really happened after she walked out of her apartment? And why did everyone around her seem to have a different version of the story? Her friends weren't quiet. Not at all. They went straight to social media, posting photos, pleading for help. But they also said something strange and chilling. Alexis, they said, had been scared for her life. She had confided in them about her marriage, about arguments, about feeling watched, trapped, and about wanting to leave. One friend even said Alexis had told her she was planning to separate. She wanted out. But according to her husband, Tom Sharkey, everything was fine. He told reporters Alexis just left the house after an argument, that she walked out on foot and never came back. He didn't call the police right away, didn't sound worried, just confused. But here's the part I can't stop thinking about. Alexis's body was found less than 24 hours after she was reported missing by a city worker. Naked, dumped near the side of the road less than 4 miles from where she lived. No wounds, no bruises, no blood, just left there. And somehow, her phone was still active. This next part makes everything feel more sinister. Her phone, the one she used for everything, kept pinging after she vanished. Multiple times. That means it was on. Moving. Connecting to towers, which only raises more questions. Was someone trying to make it look like she was alive? Were they tracking her movements? Or had someone else taken the phone after she was already gone? The official cause of death wouldn't come for weeks, but people weren't waiting. Theories spread online. Was it a stalker? A jealous partner? A robbery gone wrong? But no money was taken. No belongings were missing. And the scene, too clean. One thing became painfully clear. Whoever left Alexis there didn't want her found right away. But Houston PD was closing in, and someone close to her was about to break. Just days after Alexis's body was found, her husband, Tom Sharkey, did something strange. He went public. He gave interviews, spoke to TV crews, insisted they weren't having problems, said people were twisting the story. She wasn't scared of me, he claimed. We loved each other. We were just stressed. But his face told a different story. He didn't cry, didn't plead for answers. In fact, he got defensive, fast. And online, people weren't buying it. Friends of Alexis started talking more openly. One said, she didn't just leave that house she was running. Others said she had finally decided to leave Tom for good. And here's what really made people stop and stare: the way Tom talked about Alexis, past tense, almost cold, like he was already saying goodbye, but not in a way a grieving husband would. So the question is, why go on camera? Why speak at all unless you're trying to control the narrative? Weeks went by. The world waited. And then the medical examiner finally released the report. Cause of death: strangulation. Suddenly, everything changed. This wasn't an accident. Alexis hadn't collapsed. She hadn't fallen. Someone had killed her with their bare hands. That means this wasn't random. It was personal, intimate, and brutal. The autopsy also confirmed something else. Alexis had likely been dead long before her body was discovered. Whoever left her on that roadside had waited. That means the killer had time. Time to clean up, to think, to plan. So let's ask the obvious question: who had that kind of time? Who would want Alexis dead and make sure no one could save her? As police worked the case behind the scenes, something else kept catching their attention: Alexis's digital footprint. She lived online. Texts, DMs, stories, travel plans, and right before she vanished, her messages showed something disturbing. She was arguing with someone, fighting about her future, talking about getting space, needing time. And over one name came up: Tom. He claimed they weren't fighting, but her phone told a different story. Investigators pieced together her last known steps using GPS data. They traced her route, matched up text timestamps, and one thing stood out: there was a gap. A strange gap between when she left and when her phone went dark. A window of time where she could have gone anywhere, met anyone, but all signs pointed back to one place: the apartment she shared with Tom. And soon the police made their move, but they were too late. By the time the autopsy confirmed strangulation, the Houston Police Department had already zeroed in. Their number one person of interest: Tom Sharkey. But they weren't rushing it. Investigators built the case quietly, collected texts, interviewed friends, reviewed security footage from the apartment complex, searched phone data, anything to avoid mistakes. They knew this wouldn't be easy. Tom had gone quiet. No more interviews, no social media. He had moved out of Houston and was bouncing between states, staying with family. But behind the scenes, a grand jury was working. And finally, in July of 2021, a warrant for Tom's arrest was signed. He was going to be charged with the murder of Alexis Sharkey. Police knew where he was. They tracked him to Florida, set up a quiet operation. No press, no big headlines. But when they knocked on the door, they were met with silence. Tom Sharkey never stood trial, because by the time police arrived at his relative's home in Fort Myers, Florida, he was already dead. They found him in a bedroom. He had died by suicide, just moments before law enforcement made contact. He knew they were coming. And just like that, the one person who might have told the full story was gone. There was no note, no confession, just an ending. And yet, for many people following this case, it didn't feel like closure. It felt unfinished, too fast, too convenient. Why run if you're innocent? Why hide if you have nothing to cover up? And what about the phone? The missing hours? The exact timeline? So many questions left behind. Here's where this case haunts you. Yes, police believe Tom Sharkey killed Alexis, and the evidence, they say, was building strong, enough to charge, enough to arrest. But without a trial, there are gaps that may never be filled, like the exact moment it happened, or whether anyone helped him cover it up, or how Alexis's body was moved and left so precisely. Some think Tom had help. Others believe he acted alone. A few questioned whether it was premeditated or something that exploded in the heat of the moment. And then there's the digital trail, her phone's movements, her final messages, the deleted content. Why was it so hard to piece together? Was someone scrubbing the data? And the biggest question of all, why did a rising star, someone so full of life, end up on the side of a road, stripped of everything, while the world watched her Instagram, waiting for her next post? To most of the world, Alexis Sharkey's life looked perfect. She had thousands of followers, posted glowing selfies, promoted beauty products, traveled, made motivational videos, smiled in nearly every frame. But behind the camera, it was different. Her close friends said Alexis had started opening up more, not on Instagram, but in private. She felt trapped in her marriage, said things weren't what they seemed. One friend recalled Alexis saying she felt like a prisoner, that she didn't feel safe, that her husband was controlling, that he watched her every move. But here's the complicated part. There were no police reports, no public records of abuse, no dramatic breakups online, no signs unless you knew where to look. Because, like a lot of women in troubled relationships, Alexis had become a master at hiding pain behind a perfect filter. Tom Sharkey was older, more private. He wasn't into social media the way Alexis was. In fact, he hated it. Friends say he would mock her online life, call it fake, get jealous of the attention she got. He didn't want her posting so much, didn't like her traveling for work. He wanted control, not just over the relationship, but over how she looked, who she saw, and what she said. Alexis, on the other hand, was growing fast, brand deals, sponsored trips, new friends, more independence, and that made Tom uncomfortable. One friend said he felt like he was losing her and she wasn't afraid anymore. By the fall of 2020, Alexis had told at least 3 people she was planning to leave him. She wanted out. And that's often the most dangerous moment for someone in a controlling relationship. It's not when they stay, it's when they try to leave. Police never officially released what they found in the apartment Alexis shared with Tom, but sources close to the case said it was clear something had happened there. Neighbors reported hearing arguments, doors slamming. One said they heard crying late at night, but no one called police. No one intervened, not until it was too late. And when detectives came looking, Tom had already packed up and left, which means whatever evidence may have existed inside those walls was gone. There was no footage from inside the building, no eyewitnesses, and no confession. Only silence, emptiness, and a timeline that pointed back to one conclusion: Alexis never walked out on her own. Someone made sure she didn't come back. As soon as the news broke that Alexis Sharkey had been found dead, her story exploded online. It wasn't just local news anymore, it was national headlines, Instagram feeds, Reddit threads, TikToks, YouTube deep dives. People were drawn in not just by the crime, but by the contrast. How could someone so full of life, someone who looked so happy just days before, end up dead, alone, and dumped? Her final photos became haunting. Her captions were reread, analyzed for hidden meanings. Every friend who spoke up got pulled into the spotlight. And then came the theories. Was she being followed? Was it someone she trusted? Was there something darker happening behind the scenes? People didn't just want justice. They wanted answers. They wanted to solve it themselves. But as more theories spread, the truth became harder to see. There were three main theories circulating online, and each one had its believers. The first, that Alexis was killed by a stranger, someone she met online. A stalker, maybe. It's rare, but not impossible, especially for public figures. The second theory, that her death was the result of a domestic argument that turned violent. Something snapped and she didn't make it out. The third, that someone helped cover it up, that Tom didn't act alone, that someone helped move the body, clean the scene, or even erase data from her phone. The phone pings kept that third theory alive. The timing, the clean dump site, the silence afterward. And here's the wildest part. None of these theories could be fully proven or ruled out, because the one man who might have known everything was gone. And with no trial, no testimony, and no full release of evidence, this case became a magnet for speculation. Somewhere along the way, people forgot that Alexis was real. Not just a case, not just a mystery, not just a trending story with a tragic twist. She was a daughter, a friend, a dreamer, someone who worked hard to build a life for herself, someone who lit up rooms and made people laugh. Her mom, Stacy, said it best in an interview. She wasn't just an Instagram star. She was my baby, my best friend, and she was hurting more than anyone knew. The pressure, the silence, the image she had to keep up, the pain she couldn't share. It's easy to scroll past a perfect picture, but behind every post, there's a life you can't always see. And in Alexis's case, that life was unraveling long before anyone realized. To be fair, Houston police did move. Slowly, yes, but they did build a case. They didn't rush. They followed the digital trail, tracked interviews, consulted experts. But critics say it took too long. It took over half a year to issue a warrant even after Alexis's body was found and ruled a homicide. Some believe that delay gave Tom time to disappear, to clean up evidence, maybe even to plan his escape. And the apartment? We still don't know what was collected, what was missed, or what might have been overlooked in those first crucial days. No public arrest, no press conference, no closure. Just a quiet operation in Florida, and an ending that raised more questions than it answered. Tom Sharkey's death ended the criminal case, but it didn't end the story. It actually froze it. Without a suspect to interrogate, without a trial to release evidence, the public never got a full timeline. No confirmation on motive. No look into what he was doing in the hours after Alexis vanished. Investigators believe the evidence pointed to him strongly. But when he took his own life, he took the truth with him. Was it guilt? Was it panic? Or was it a final act of control, a way to make sure he told the last chapter of the story? We may never know. But Alexis's family was left with a loss that no courtroom, no statement, and no theory could fix. In the years since Alexis's death, people still search her name, still follow her old page, still wonder what could have been. Her friends post tributes. Her family marks the anniversaries, but the pain never really fades. And in the influencer world, her story became a quiet warning. Behind the curated posts, behind the perfect lighting, someone could be struggling, hurting, afraid to speak out. The ones with the biggest smiles sometimes carry the heaviest silence. So we have to ask, how many others are out there living with fear behind filters? And would we even know? Even with a suspect named, even with a cause of death confirmed, even with an arrest warrant issued, this case doesn't feel finished. There are still pieces missing. Why was Alexis's body left the way it was? Why wasn't there more evidence at the apartment? What really happened in those final moments? Did she try to run? Did she see it coming? And the phone, who had it? And why was it still pinging long after she was gone? So many questions, and no one left to answer them. But maybe that's the cruelest part of this case. It ends in silence. And silence, for the people who loved her, is the hardest thing to live with. In the end, Alexis Sharkey's story is more than just a tragedy. It's a reflection of what we miss when we look only at the surface. A beautiful woman, a growing career, a picture perfect feed, and a private life full of fear she didn't know how to escape. This story reminds us to look closer, to listen better, to ask how someone is really doing before it's too late. And if there's one thing this case should leave us with, it's this. When someone says they're scared, we have to believe them, no matter how perfect their life might look online. If you think her story deserves more attention, don't scroll. Like, share, and let her voice be heard.